So, in a book called The How of Happiness, basically we learn that as far as science is concerned, we have a great deal of control over our own happiness. By the way, all the book covers that I show you in my presentations today and next week, for those of you who are interested, I have a suggested reading list that I can share that with you. So, in that book, the authors teach us that 50% when it comes to our happiness, we have no control. It's basically genetic disposition. So by nature, some people are happier than other people. 10% is the differences in our life circumstances. So it could be health or the lack of it. It could be marriage, divorce, and things of that nature. So 10% would be the circumstances in life. But the promising part is the 40% that we really have control over our own happiness by monitoring and regulating the thoughts that we think and the patterns of basically behavior. So that 40% is very important. In a book called The Hidden Gifts of Helping, Stephen Post, who is a great positive psychologist, tells us about 4 elements for happiness with a spiritual foundation. Well, in reality, that is the true happiness, is the lasting happiness, the spiritual happiness. So I'm going to focus on that a little bit here and a whole lot next session. So he says, as far as the 4 elements, love others and let their happiness be as significant to you as your own happiness. I'm going to be talking a lot about love next week as the cause for our creation and a wonderful path to happiness. Cultivate moral integrity. Live a life based on virtues, he teaches us. And then the third one is live a life of gratitude, simplicity, and contentment. Gratitude I will cover a little bit today. Simplicity and contentment are very important because the more we have in this life, the more we want to have. And that's why Buddha says contentment is a great treasure. Have high and noble goals as well as a purpose in life that does not revolve around material things. I love this quotation from Henry Drummond where it says, happiness consists in giving and in serving others. I'll be talking about service a lot next week. So one of the things I wanted to focus on today is on happiness enhancing techniques. There's a whole chapter in our book called the Happiness Enhancing Activities or Techniques. So this, in a way, I think is a practical book that teaches techniques and concepts also. So one of the things that we can do to become happier is recalling past pleasant experiences. You can do this periodically in the course of the day, bring to mind the good memories that you have in your life, or you can keep a happiness journal. I've been doing this for several years and I really love that practice. And to have or to keep a happiness journal, you could just start with the memories that you can think of. And then when good things happen, just put a date and write about them. They don't have to be really great, magnificent things. It could be just a nice conversation you had with a friend or anything, gratitude moment and things of that nature. One of the good things that comes about as a result of keeping a happiness journal is, not every day is a good day. And what happens is that when you are having a bad day, the mind tricks you into thinking that you never had a good day in your life when you feel depressed. So then you can get a hold of your happiness journal and just read all of those, accounts, all those examples. And you see that life is really a good life. It's a wonderful life. So that is one thing you can do with the happiness journal. Another thing is that you can make that a daily or nightly practice. So at the end of the day, you could just, as you do your daily accountability, just read a page or two from the happiness journal and relive that. What it does is that, scientifically, we know that it helps with the release of good hormones in the brain. So it is good. It makes you feel good. And the more you do it, the better you feel. So that is good for a healthier brain, feeling good. Another happiness enhancing activity that we can talk about is showing kindness to other people through our words and our deeds. So Aristotle says the ideal man takes joy in doing favors for others. One practice that you may want to do if you haven't done that is to devote an entire day out of the 7 days of the week, or maybe even 2. I've decided that I want 2 days to devote to that. Friday, for me, it's Fridays and Mondays. I call them the days of love and kindness. So specific days set aside primarily for kindness. So from the moment you wake up in the morning, you think to yourself, this is a day of kindness. Let me think about only what are some ways that I can make other people happy. Some kind activities. You're going to be kind to yourself, because a lot of times we are not kind to ourselves. So kind words and even kind thoughts, because first are the thoughts, and of course there is the action. Another happiness enhancing activity that we can talk about is looking at other people's good qualities. Mahatma Gandhi says, I look only to the good qualities of men, not being faultless myself. I won't presume to probe into the faults of others. So when we look at other people's good qualities, it really, what it does is that by focusing on the positive, we reinforce the good quality in that person. And of course, it really helps with having a good relationship with that person. So one way to be happy is to look at other people's good qualities. Another one is practicing sympathetic joy. Baha'u'llah teaches us, true peace and tranquility will only be realized when every soul will have become the well-wisher of all mankind. Sympathy is actually a word that we use for, when you lose, you have a family member, basically you have a friend who loses a family member or something, you sympathize with them, you drop them a note, you send them a card. So you sympathize with them. But in Buddhist terminology, they have sympathetic joy when you rejoice at the happiness of another person. So we express our happiness for the success of other people. When there is a new baby born, when there's a job promotion, somebody gets married. So you basically drop a note, give them a call, congratulate them. So you share in their happiness. And the more you do that, the happier you become by sharing in their happiness. And basically pray even for their happiness and success to continue. There is a meditation about that, actually, that we talk about in that book, where you bring that person in mind and just pray for them and for the continued success of the person. Developing confidence is a way to happiness. Now, a lack of confidence could come from upbringing. And that really plays a very important role. I remember I had a friend, I still remember her name, Rachel, about 20 years ago. In the class, I was teaching world religions, and she came up to my desk and said, talking about, her life, she said, when I was growing up, my mother used to tell me, Rachel, you never amount to anything. And I'm thinking to myself, with a childhood like that, it's going to be really hard when you grow up to have a great deal of confidence in yourself. So upbringing plays a very important role. So we need to be careful with our children. Comparing to ourselves to other people is also very important. In the Family Virtues Guide, the authors tell us the moment you envy someone else, you are rejecting the gifts that are yours. So I personally believe that we should not compare ourselves to other people, but if you have to do the comparison, let's just make it not the upward comparison, where you compare your weak points with the other people's strong points, but let's do the downward comparison when we compare ourselves to the people who are not doing as well as we do in this life. One of the ways that we can cultivate confidence and a healthy self-perception and self-love is by practicing what we do well and basically drawing strength and confidence from our success. This is a really nice quote from Norman Vincent Peale. I consider him the father of positive psychology. Unfortunately, they don't give him the credit, but I've read pretty much everything he has written, and studying the positive psychology, I see that the root of a lot of the things that they talk about come from the words of Norman Vincent Peale. So he says, if you have a skill, seize every opportunity to exercise that skill. If you bake good cookies, bake them every chance you get. If you don't need them, Give them away. The thanks and praise you get will strengthen your self-image. Another happiness enhancing activity is spending time in nature, basically. It helps with our moods getting better, boosts our immune system, lowers our blood pressure, reduces the feeling of pain, and also helps us sleep better. Even looking at the pictures of trees will help us relax and relaxes the muscles. Being positive plays a very important role in our happiness. William James, a great psychologist and philosopher, says the greatest discovery of my generation is that a human being can alter his life by altering his attitudes. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, who's a great social psychologist, has done a lot of research and published a lot of books on the subject of positivity, says that basically there's a strong connection between positivity and our mental as well as physical health, and that being positive serves against basically getting depressed and also developing heart disease. But being positive doesn't come easy with a lot of us, but how can we cultivate positivity? Here are some ideas that we have in our book. One is to stay away from negative people. Well, if they're family members, that's a different story. We try to be more positive around them, but other people, we really don't need to have them in our lives. Stay away from negative and worrisome conversations. That's what's happening a lot nowadays. So we need to be careful with what we put in our brain, because that grows really. Replace if only with next time. This is a beautiful concept that Norman Vincent Peale teaches. And the first time I came across that, I thought to myself, this is too easy, it cannot really happen. But it's very doable, and I highly recommend it to you. So if you ever catch yourself thinking, if only I had done that, if only I had said that, so basically catch yourself being in the past, so immediately replace that with next time. That's okay, next time I do better. And believe me, it really does work. Another thing is to change your media diet. We need to be careful, especially nowadays with what's happening in the world, with what we put in our brain, because it does grow. I suggest not to start your morning with emails or anything that has to do with social media. That's very, very important. That's Baha'u'llah teaches us to contemplate. Start the day with contemplation and end it with that. So the media diet is very important. And ending the day also with nothing that can disturb the peace of mind and affect basically the nature of our dreams. Practicing mindfulness really helps with positivity. And it could be a whole lecture about meditation and mindfulness. I don't have time to talk about it today. Another one is to notice and savor positive moments. Savoring is very important, and we can do plenty of that in the course of the day. So I'll give you some examples if you have never done that before, or you are not doing a whole lot of it. So it's like feel when you go for a walk, you can feel the breeze on your face, listening to a bird chirping as you go for a walk, or aroma of your tea or coffee, just savor that, or your favorite food, or when you hug someone you love, just savor that. And when someone pays you a nice compliment, just don't brush it aside immediately. You can just savor it, no problem with that. Now I'm going to move on to gratitude as a major element for our happiness. Dale Carnegie, who has done a great deal of research on being positive altogether, he has a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. It's a wonderful book. I've read it many, many times. Highly recommend it to you. How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. It says, one of the most tragic things I know about human nature is that all of us tend to put off living. We are all dreaming of some magical rose garden over the horizon instead of enjoying roses, the roses that are blooming outside our windows today. So, what is gratitude? Gratitude is counting our blessings, looking at the bright side of things, being aware of the beauty that's around us in nature, in our family members, and within us. A lot of times we are blind when it comes to seeing all the good qualities, virtues that God has given us. Not waiting for all the dreams to come true to be happy. We can always be happy in any day, find things to be happy. I can tell you the best book when it comes to science and gratitude that we have seen, the two of us that were working on this book on the subject of happiness and gratitude is a book called Thanks, How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happier. It is written by Dr. Robert Emmons. You see the book cover there. Now, based on his research, we learned that practicing gratitude, keeping gratitude journal for one thing, helps reduce the stress, improves health, leads to optimism and energy, can increase happiness levels by 25%. That's a lot. Strengthens the immune system. Now, but how do we cultivate an attitude of gratitude? It's not easy to be grateful if you don't have a lot of practice with. So here are some ideas for learning to become more grateful. The most potent, based on my own personal experience, and Bijan and Adib also, all three of us, we keep gratitude journal. So is to keep a gratitude journal. And so at the end of the day, some people say you can do it in the morning. I personally believe that it needs to be done at the end of the day, because then you have the whole day to examine and write about. So you think of at least 5 things for which you're grateful. Some of them could be things that happen in the course of the day. In writing in the gratitude journal, it would be good to use a language of gift. Like today, I'm grateful for the gift of God in my life, for the gift of spirituality, because those are all really gifts that we a lot of times are taken for granted. I'm grateful for the gift of people in my life, my friends, family members. So people, we can be grateful for them. For the gift of nature, we could be grateful. Skills that we have, talents and interests, those are the things that are God-given, and we can be grateful for them. Basic material things, big and small, that we take so much for granted. I do some volunteer work teaching English as second language, and I was teaching a class over at Monte Cristo some years ago, and the majority of the students are low-income Hispanic students. And we did the gratitude journal with that class, and most of them were thankful for the roof over their head and the food on their table, the things that we take so much for granted. So we could be grateful for our AC working today, for the comfort of our home, for our car, for the things that we take for granted. To be grateful for positive and also for negative experiences. Wonderful things result from tests and difficulties. So the negative experiences or something that you dreaded that would happen and didn't happen, you can be grateful for that. Virtues, if you are by nature a very loving person, a very giving person, a kind person, patient person, so we can be happy for the gift of those qualities. Another way to cultivate an attitude of gratitude, in addition to keeping a gratitude journal, is to take gratitude breaks. And maybe as we are working on the computer, maybe every 20, 25 minutes, we just go for a short walk and just think about at least one thing that you're grateful. At that point, you can ask yourself, what am I grateful for right now? And just at least think of one thing that you're grateful for. I call that taking a gratitude break. And we know scientifically that even 5 minutes of gratitude can help us become calmer. Practicing gratitude as a tool to overcome low mood is also a way to cultivate gratitude. A friend of ours was telling us that she took her father to the doctor, and sharing the experience that she was having a really low moment, a moment of depression, didn't know how to deal with that. So started thinking about all the good things that she's grateful for, and then gradually all that changed, and she started feeling really wonderful. So any low moment in the course of the day, I think, would be a time to think of the things we are grateful for. Keeping a gratitude box is a really wonderful practice if you've never done that, especially with children. Maybe you want to do that. This is our hallway. We practiced that for some years. It's a gratitude box that we had. And so you need to have a box and basically a pen and paper. And at the end of the day, the family members would write one thing that they're grateful for and just fold it and put it in that gratitude box. And then at the end of the week, you can just all get together with the family members and just go over all of the things that you were grateful in the course of the week. So that's a practice that children like to participate in it a lot too. Throwing a gratitude party for someone that you love, your parents, siblings, friends, grandparents, teachers. For years, I wanted to do this for my mother. I wanted to throw a gratitude party for her because she had done so much for the whole family. My dad developed Parkinson's disease and he was confined to bed for a whole year, and he slowly died before my eyes. And I saw how much suffering my mother endured. She was a full-time nurse to him, and a lot of other things that she has done and continues to do for the family. So I consulted with Bijan and Adib, and we decided to throw her a gratitude party. And we're all very excited about that. Bijan prepared a beautiful PowerPoint talking about all the wonderful things she had done for the family. And so it was going to be a surprise party. We invited my sisters and the families. And so she came in and there was a large banner basically telling her how much we love her and said gratitude parties. She walked in and asked, a party for who? And we said, for you. And she said, what did I do? I said, because I've done so much. We love you so much. And she was so happy. And I personally don't think we did anything special for her. We should have done this years ago. But when she left, the next day she called me and said, Farnaz, those 3 hours that we were at your house, it was like I was in heaven. And so, while we have our parents, I think this might be a good idea to do this if we have our parents, or if, there is a friend that you want to honor, or grandparents. So this is a nice idea. If you've never done it, I recommend it to you. Now, as far as the happiness enhancing techniques and secrets of true happiness, we can also talk about family unit, because family can be a source of joy or it could be a cause of misery. So what is the ideal family is the question. I would think that the ideal family is a family in which the family members find peace and joy in each other's companionship. Communication among the family members needs to be mature, rational, and not childish and emotional. And the fundamental principle underlying communication definitely needs to be loving. Love is a major element here. Meal times is very important when the family comes together. It needs to be with love and gratitude, not basically nagging and argument, criticizing, and negative discussion that a lot of times happens. And of course, that doesn't help with the digestion of food either. We're all familiar with a family that prays together, stays together. So for a family to thrive and experience true happiness and tranquility, they need to come together in prayer and contemplation. And this practice, I personally believe, needs to begin with children when they're very young. So it becomes a second nature. When something happens in their lives, they know that they can always pray to God and can be helped. Virtues need to be taught to children from an early age. Undoubtedly, the best book that I'm familiar with, our family of 3 we are familiar with, is the Family Virtues Guide. Simple ways to bring out the best in our children, Linda and Dan Pavov. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. Marriage is basically, to build a strong marriage is something that requires a lot of patience and love and effort and time. And to have a successful, happy marriage really is one of the secrets of true happiness. I can tell you the best book that we have come across when it comes to marriage is called The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by Dr. John Gottman. And we highly recommend this book to you. Chapter after chapter, he just gives you examples of how a marriage can become a better marriage altogether. To build a strong, I wanted to read that quote from William James also. Says the deepest principle in human nature is a craving to be appreciated. So giving compliments and expressing genuine appreciation to one's spouse is very, very important. Taking delight in our spouse's success and good fortune, celebrating with them, is very important also. If you've never kept a marriage journal, highly recommend it to you. To do so, maybe you want to start with writing some beautiful memories that you share with your spouse, and then write about their good qualities, and then write when good things happen in your relationship. When he or she does something wonderful for you, write about that. And it is really a great tool for rekindling love and romance in a relationship when there are tests and trials, because when those things happen, we have a tendency to forget about all those wonderful days, and so we can read and relive and appreciate our spouses. Having fun together is very important. One of the things that Bijan and I do a lot of times at bedtime, we watch funny shows. For years it was I Love Lucy, and lately it's Charlie Chaplin that we watch and just laugh together. So we really believe in that. Demonstrating mutual love and respect, very important. Being our spouse's best friend, being willing and ready to compromise, and praying for each other is extremely important. Now, finally, I want to end my talk with what is the purpose of life. I'm going to continue with that next week and delve more into spirituality as the most important secret to our happiness. But for now, I'm going to just start with that as far as what is the purpose of life. Divine religions teach us that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So our true identity is not the body. It is the soul that comes into being at the moment of conception and starts its journey here on earth and continues its journey throughout the countless realms of God, never ending. So the real happiness comes as a result of strengthening the spiritual side of us. Adibran, would you read this quote from Baha'u'llah about the purpose of life, please?
Sure thing. They, meaning humans, know not whence they came, nor for what purpose they have come, meaning to this world. I swear by him who is our beloved and yours, were they to apprehend this purpose to the extent of a needle's eye, they would hold fast unto it and cast all else aside. That is, they would dispense with all else save God and dedicate themselves to his service and good pleasure.
Thank you very much. Would you please read this also?
Man is like unto a tree. If he be adorned with fruit, he hath been and will ever be worthy of praise and commendation. The fruits of the human tree are exquisite, highly desired, and dearly cherished. Among them are upright character, virtuous deeds, and a goodly utterance. The water for these trees is the living water of the sacred words, uttered by the beloved of the world.
Thank you very much, Adibran. So, what is the purpose of life? I want to draw your attention to this beautiful artwork that was done by a talented local artist, Jay Braid, and we really appreciate the time and effort that he put into that. So the virtue tree. So we've been created to know God, to love God, to worship him. We've been created to love God, to love ourselves, to love other people, and to serve. We are here to grow our souls, to cultivate positive habits and virtues such as love, kindness, generosity, compassion, thankfulness, and to eliminate negative qualities such as jealousy, prejudice, hatred, greed, envy, and so forth. So, what is the water for the growth of this virtue tree? The water for the growth is contemplation on the words of the scriptures, prayer, and meditation. Baha'u'llah teaches us that we need to contemplate in the morning and evening. We need to basically start and end our days with contemplation. And I can tell you, out of all the meditation techniques, if I have to choose one that is the most potent of them all, that can transform us into new beings and help us in every aspect of our lives, I would say that would be contemplation. It can recreate us every day. So in contemplation, we choose a verse and we try to basically understand what it means. So we seek insight. For instance, if the verse that we start our day with is in the garden of the heart plant, not but the rose of love, as Baha'u'llah teaches us in the Hidden Rose. So we read this and we ask ourselves, so what is the meaning of this verse? And then as we slowly read and reflect, then we ask ourselves, how can this verse change me? Well, Baha'u'llah is teaching me to be loving. So how can I be loving today? What are some things that I can do today to express love to other people, to express love to my own self, to be kinder and more gentle to my own soul today? So first to try to understand, and then basically try to live what we learn in the scripture. If you are not familiar with the Cyber Temple, I wanted to recommend this website. It's an interfaith and nonprofit website that you can find the scriptural passages from all different religions. And so there's, like, for instance, love and faith and gratitude and so on and so forth. And when you go there, you find passages from all different holy scriptures, and then you can just pick one verse and you just focus on that. If you have a very busy day and don't have time to really search through the scriptures, that makes the job easier for you. A practice that goes hand in hand with contemplation, I believe, is daily accountability through self-examination. Baha'u'llah teaches us this practice, but I think positive psychology is catching up, because we see that nowadays in psychology book talking about the same idea. And so by doing daily accountability, we kind of ask ourselves at the end of the day, so how was my day? What are the good things that I have done? And what are the things that I'm not very happy about doing? So if I have done good things, if I made another person happy, then expressing gratitude, being grateful to Baha'u'llah for giving, or God for giving us the strength to do it, because if it's not the confirmations from God, we cannot do anything other than committing sins. That's what I believe in. So being grateful to God for giving us the strength and the idea to do the right thing. And what if, what I did was not right? Maybe I got angry and I said something that I'm not very happy about. Then basically asking forgiveness from God and, acknowledging that we are human and we make mistakes, and seeking assistance to do better next time. So the goal is spiritual transformation, is to learn and to grow, and not to blame ourselves and live in the past and try to fix something that we have no control over, if it's all the past that we're trying to change, and to grow in wisdom. That's all I had to say. Adib is going to read some passages from our book. And then if there are questions, Bijan is here. And so Bijan, Adib, and myself, if we can help you, we're more than happy to do that. So Adib, would you please read for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, I guess it's going to override yours, which is just fine. Okay, can everyone see this? Great, thank you. So we've got passages from, just a few passages from a couple of chapters that we thought would be relevant to and really supplement some of this content. So we've got a couple of things from the chapter on happiness techniques, which is chapter 10. So starting with happiness enhancing activities. In our daily lives, there are actually a wide range of activities we can choose from to enhance our happiness. Among them are the following: recalling past pleasant experiences. A powerful way to cultivate happiness, especially during periods of inactivity, is to focus our attention on past pleasant experiences. Reviving and reliving such experiences helps stimulate the pressure and weaken the displeasure systems in our brain. Famous Brooklyn Dodgers baseball pitcher Carl Erskine, who once pitched a no-hitter and struck out 14 New York Yankees in the 1953 World Series, had a formula for overcoming pressure. Quote, one sermon has helped me overcome pressure better than the advice of any coach. Its substance was that, like a squirrel hoarding chestnuts, we should store up our moments of happiness and triumph, so that in a crisis we can draw upon these memories for help and inspiration. As a kid, I used to fish at the bend of a little country stream just outside of my hometown. I can vividly remember this spot in the middle of a big green pasture, surrounded by tall, cool trees. Whenever tension builds up, both on or off the ball field now, I concentrate on this relaxing scene, and the knots inside me loosen up. In his book, Spiritual Intelligence, Professor Emeritus of Psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Khalil Khavari, also shares a personal experience with this practice. Quote, one day, as I was walking from my lab to a class, as is my habit, I was meditating and focusing on pleasant thoughts, and apparently smiling. Suddenly, a graduate student I knew approached me, said hello, and grinned from ear to ear. After a couple of ordinary exchanges, he finally got the courage to ask, Dr. Khavari, what are you on? For a moment, I didn't understand. What do you mean? I asked, puzzled. He said sheepishly, I mean, I see you smiling to yourself, walking in this freezing weather. I was slow, but I finally got what he meant by on. I said, I'm on a marvelous drug that we all carry inside our head, but seldom use. I am working the pleasure centers of the brain by meditating and recalling pleasant memories. I'm not sure that he believed me or even wanted to believe me. He wanted the name of the chemical he thought I was using so that he could walk around smiling happily in the freezing snow. He grinned skeptically, shook his head, and walked away. The next technique for gratitude, grateful savoring. Grateful savoring is the ability to notice, appreciate, and enhance the positive moments in our lives. In practicing grateful savoring, we are not only aware of the positive experiences, but also choose to focus on them with a grateful heart and mind. Most of us have the tendency to rush through our pleasant life experiences. Learning to savor them with a grateful heart will lead to a sense of joy, peace, and contentment, no matter how small the experience might be. Savoring positive experiences and thoughts will teach the brain to fall into a more naturally positive pattern. Look forward to a positive experience, relish it while it's happening, and later, allow the positive feelings to re-emerge as you hold the experience in your memory. To practice grateful savoring, you can enjoy a bite of your favorite food, take a sip of your warm drink in a cold day, smell the aroma of a scented candle, feel the breeze on your face as you walk in nature, listen to the birds chirping in your backyard, become absorbed in the beauty of flowers and trees, listen to a piece of calming music, enjoy a nice compliment or a hug with a grateful mind and heart. For instance, as you hug your child or a friend, you can not only enjoy the hug, but think about how grateful you are for having them in your life. When you listen to the birds chirping, you can not only be absorbed in the sound, but be grateful that you can hear. And then what dovetails with that is the next chapter on gratitude. We've got one passage here from that I'll read. Practicing gratitude as a tool to overcome low mood. Sometimes going over all the blessings and gifts in our lives can help us overcome sadness. A friend once told us of her experience with this practice. She said that one day she took her father to a doctor's office for some tests. As she was sitting in the waiting area, she felt that little by little her mood was changing. It was as if a cloud of sorrow was gradually covering the sky of her mind. She didn't know what to do and was worried that when the doctor would want to talk with her, she might burst into tears. Then a positive thought came to her mind. What if she started counting her blessings, focusing on all the things that were right in her life, and she needed to be grateful for them? So she began reviewing those things one after the other. The more time she spent on that practice, the better she began to feel. By the time her father's tests were done, she was all smiles. She spoke with her father and his doctor with joy and peace beyond what she could have imagined 30 minutes earlier. So next time you feel down, think about all the gifts and blessings in your life and see if the practice will help you feel better. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so are there any questions? Thank you.
I have a question. I have a question about these difficult times that the humanity is going through, the pandemic, and some of the techniques we had, like, meeting friends, socializing, is not really available. It's not been available for the last 6 months. So how do we compensate for some of the shortcomings of the situation that we are in?
I can take that. If Adib and Farnaz, do you have any comments?
No, honey, please go ahead.
All you.
Okay. Well, Arasujan, first of all, before I answer your question, I wanted to say how happy I am to see all of you here, and special thanks to Sandy and Eric and Christina, whom we haven't seen in years. So thank you for being here. One of the best ways, Arasujan, that we could compensate for that is exactly what we are doing right now, which is connecting and remaining connected using technology. And in fact, one of the ways, first of all, I must say that when we set out to do this book, we didn't have any preconceived notion or hypothesis that perhaps there might be a connection between science and religion, between being spiritual or religious and experiencing sustained happiness. But the more we dug into the data over the years, the more obvious it became that if you have a spiritual, at least a spiritual worldview, not necessarily a religious, but at least a spiritual worldview, you are more equipped to fight depression, to stand up against the tests and difficulties in life. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because when you are part of a religious community like we are, like Christians, if you're a Christian, you have a larger community, a larger family of your church, your congregation. If you're a Jew, your synagogue. If you're a Muslim, your mosque. If you're a Baha'i centers. Think about all the Zoom sessions that we and people of other faiths are doing right now all over the planet. This is one of the most effective ways of remaining connected and spreading the love and sharing our values. We continue to do that. In fact, there is one of the best studies that we came across in our research was, believe it or not, a study that started in 1938 at Harvard. I think it's called, I want to mention the exact name, Harvard's Grand Study of Adult Development. This study is still going on. If you can believe that, it's the longest study of human behavior ever done. There are still a few of the participants who are still, well, as of 2017, when we were closing the research, a few of them were still alive. A total of 268 people had attended or were part of this study, and there were a few of them still alive in their 90s. The importance of that study was they followed these 268 people throughout all these decades. And so far, 2 books have been published on the results of those studies. And the highlights of those books and the highlights of the conclusions of the study, they are included in our book. And I have the summary, actually, because I knew this kind of question may come up. So there were a few things that stood out immediately in this study as they kept interviewing these folks and saying, okay, are you happy or miserable? And depending on their responses, they would basically take a journal of all the responses and all the reactions they got. And what became clear to them were things that may sound like common sense, but now what we have is actually scientific evidence for them. The very first ingredient, the most important ingredient, is the element of love. So if people were loving towards themselves and others, that was the best method and the most fundamental method for experiencing lasting happiness. Another one was you have to have meaningful relationship, not just with your family, but with your extended family, friends, your congregation, and the larger the circle of your relationship was, the higher your chance of happiness. So that's why when we do these Zoom sessions, especially if they are outside of our own community and we are feeling connected to the rest of the Baha'i world, that sense of connectedness brings us additional joy and happiness that may not be available to individuals who don't have those kinds of relationships. Another one was obviously don't abuse alcohol, period. Of course, we as Baha'is don't have to worry about that one. But of those people, 268 participants, whoever had abused alcohol, they were among the most miserable. They had the worst marriages, the worst kind of relationships. The next one was money and power basically doesn't equate happiness. Again, many of us already know that, but there is now scientific evidence to back it up. There are lots and lots of millionaires out there who are among the most miserable people on the planet. So there's no guarantee that if you have money or power, you're going to experience happiness. Another one was intelligence, of course, matters, because if you're smarter, usually you make better decisions, but not always. And there are different kinds of intelligences. It's not just IQ. It's emotional intelligence. It's spiritual intelligence that people who do not necessarily have a spiritual worldview, they don't have that kind of intelligence, and it affects their relationship with others. So these were, and also it's never too late to find happiness in life. Somebody in their 50s or 60s may say, you know what, I've tried, I can't feel happy. But science now has proved that there is this concept called neuroplasticity, which means that our brains are flexible, they are not fixed. If you have lived your life using certain attitudes for 40 years, it doesn't mean that you cannot change your attitude. Just some of the techniques that Farnaz mentioned, tips and techniques, if you engage in those practices, your brain can actually change your attitude. And one of the most amazing discoveries that we made during our research was, and I highly recommend these two books to you. Neuroscience is actually a field of science that is complementary. I look at it as complementary to a lot of Baha'i teachings. This gentleman, Dr. Andrew Newberg, has written two books. I don't know if it's coming across or not, but no. I will mention the titles to you. It's not? Okay. So the first one is called, actually, I want to start with the older one. Yeah. The first one is called How God Changes Your Brain. How God Changes Your Brain. And the second one is called Why God Won't Go Away. Why God Won't Go Away. I highly recommend both of these books to you. Essentially what remember, he's an MD, and we see more and more of these medical doctors actually doing this now. What they have done is they have conducted scientific studies that essentially shows that we human beings are pre-wired to show kindness and love. Just think about that for a second. The kinder you are, basically, is the kinder you are to others, the higher the chance of you experiencing happiness. It's like God is telling us, hey, you want to be happy? Be kind to others. The message is very simple, but science is not proving it. You'd be amazed at some of the studies that these guys have done with Christian nuns and Buddhist monks, and basically using fMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging, and they have basically looked at the patterns of thoughts of these individuals to see why they seem to be happier than others. And their studies actually explains why. And then think about what Baha'u'llah says, because this exactly confirms what Baha'u'llah says. Ye have been created to know God, to worship him, and to show love towards others. So for the first time ever, in our view, what makes this book unique is that there are lots of other books that talk about happiness, but to our knowledge, this is the first one that shows that there is scientific evidence behind what religions have been teaching for centuries. That being kind to yourself and others is important and fundamental to experiencing lasting happiness. This was a long, long answer to your question, Arasujan. Sorry about that. And by the way, in case you are wondering, what is that gibberish behind me? People who can't read Persian, essentially, well, in Persian, of course, because this is not a simple way of writing even in Persian, it's actually a hemistich from a famous poem by Rumi, which says, Har cheez ke dar justan ani ani, which means in English, it roughly translates to whatever is the major quest in your life, you become that, the object of that, you become that quest, basically. So if you're after money and power, you essentially become money and power, and you know where the rest of that goes. But if your object is to seek God and become divine, then you have a better chance of becoming divine and godly, which is a message that I think resounds to a lot of us Baha'is.
Wade has his hand up virtually.
Hi, thanks guys for this presentation. I hope you can hear me. IBM has published an extraordinary number, and it has to do with knowledge. They are saying that knowledge now doubles every 12 hours. So in light of that, what we're taking to be a fact at this point, how does the human mind and spirit and soul cope with that? For example, Bijan said that it's now, neuroscientists are now saying that the human brain has plasticity even in later years, whereas before, I remember neuroscientists were saying that plasticity stops at a certain age. So apparently some knowledge is good, some knowledge is bad. And, as Baha'is, we're encouraged to acquire knowledge. How do you, and the third point is, how do you not become overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge? I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say about that.
I sometimes think, I am not an AI, I am not artificial intelligence, and all this stuff keeps coming to me at speeds that seem overwhelming. And for work, what I have to learn, everything keeps changing. We can't use the same systems, but yeah, it's a challenge, but it's also, a gift, right?
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? I have a thought too, but I'm wondering if anyone else has anything to add? Okay, Wade, first of all, Chris, if you guessed who wrote chapter 1, if it was me, you were right.
Is that the
So
one that mentioned Albert Schweitzer?
Yes.
Yes, I knew that was you.
Good guess. So in that chapter, one of the things that we discuss is the concept of the purpose of life. Because if we want to experience sustained happiness, we have, I think pretty much everybody has to answer the fundamental question of why am I here? Why am I on this planet? What is the purpose of my life? The answer to that question is fundamental because it gives direction to everything else that we do. From studying a particular field of study, from jobs, from relationship with family, from marriage, it just gives direction to everything else. And so same principle, I think, applies to knowledge. Yes, as Robin said, yeah, we are not machines. We cannot handle billions and billions of bits of data. So we have to be selective. And there are only 24 hours in a day. Obviously, we have to spend, if you're lucky, 7 or 8 hours of it in sleep. So you have only about roughly 15, 16 hours to spend time on different things in your life. And so you have to be selective in how you spend your time. As Baha'is, it also affects your worldview, right? So if you are religious, then obviously you start your day with prayer and contemplation on the writings. You end your day with that too. During the day, you try to be of service to others and so on. So by definition, some of your hours are predefined. What is left is you can continue to study, whether it's writings, whether it's science. You can continue to watch movies or documentaries. You can, but you have to be eventually selective because there is so much. And if you don't want to feel overwhelmed, as Farnaz mentioned, your media diet has to be also very strict. We as a family, we don't watch that much news. Why? Because 90% of it is negative. It's either about the pandemic or it's about partisan politics, it's about killing, it's about violence. Just monitor the news, whether it's TV or newspapers. Just look at the headlines. How many positive things do you see versus negative? I'm not saying that we should bury our heads in the sand. I usually get the highlights of news from my colleagues and friends. And if it's really, really important, then I may dig deeper. But the circle of our influence is rather small. It doesn't matter how much I worry about the pandemic or about when the vaccine is coming. When the vaccine comes, I will know about it. If I read that it'll come toward the end of this year or early next year, I'm not going to follow that anymore. What good will it do? This is August. I know that it's supposed to start coming toward December or early January. That's it. So that's one example of how to basically filter the news. First of all, my recommendation, try to stay away from negative stuff, including negative news. And then think about how much. What we can do about the pandemic is to take care of ourselves and our family. That is within my control. Outside of that, what happens at the Austin community level, at the city level, at the state and federal and global level is beyond my control. It doesn't matter how many pieces of news I read about it. I can't do much unless I become an active member of the community to go promote wearing masks and other stuff. My circle of influence remains within my own tiny circle.
I think Michael Stevens has his hand up.
Yes. So to add to what I want to add to the conversation is what Bijan was talking about when he said about being selective. And so I want to speak to the experience that I've had as a musician, a performing artist, and the idea and the practice, the habit, of practice, right? There's an idea in the jazz community of going in the woodshed, right? And all of these things, going in the woodshed means when you go in to your practice space, your practice time, and you practice the things that you know and or believe that you need to do, all of that with the intention of essentially of being prepared for what it is that you have been asked to perform or could possibly be asked to perform, right? So this whole thing about happiness and to me comes down to the thing about preparation, right? Practice, preparation. And specifically, I would say also for us as humans, seems to be, and I think science supports this. I don't know what anything to cite at this point, but anything that we can do or the things that we do that engage whole body, mind, body, so whole being, I should say. So mind, body, spirit, soul, any practice that employs those things on a regular basis often produce, produce that preparation, so that when the quote unquote sweet things of life happen, you're prepared. When the things that are, bitter, you're prepared. Anything in between, you're prepared, So yeah, I really enjoyed. Thank you, Masumians, for this talk. It's been very good. I thank you for allowing me to speak about this.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It is 12:12 now. We have been going on a little longer than normal because, hey, we don't get a chance to talk and hang out much. So I'll keep this going, but none of us will be offended if anyone has to leave or anything like that. But if the Masumians still have a few more minutes, can you talk for a little while longer? You guys good? Good to go? Sure. We'll make ID to answer all questions if Farnaz get tired. But I was going to ask a couple questions. One, we have Jay here who had done the painting, the virtues tree, and let me see if I can share my screen. Right, the virtues tree right here. I was wondering if Jay wanted to talk a little bit about his art here, because I am sure, knowing Jay, that there is a little bit to the symbolism and stuff that I probably am not smart enough to pick up on. So do you have any insights or anything, Jay?
Well, I'm just grateful and I have been a small part of the project. So thank you again to the Masumians for that. It was really very collaborative illustration, as I recall. So I almost feel like they could speak at least as much about the concept behind it, because we talked quite a bit about how it would look. I think the main point is to communicate the importance of the virtues, which the book does a beautiful job of explaining. So hopefully that comes across.
Actually, if I may add, the idea of doing this painting was Farnaz's, and it's based on one of the passages in the writings of Baha'u'llah. If you allow me a second, I'm going to grab something and I'll be right back.
One thing I noticed is that each of the virtues seems to have a fruit associated with it as well.
Yeah, I think that was part of the intention.
I wanted to show you, of course, I realize you probably are not seeing this, but the virtuous tree is framed and it's on our wall at home. So thank you again, Jay, for a fantastic job with this. And the quote that inspired Farnaz with the idea of doing the virtuous tree was this from Baha'u'llah, where he says, man is like unto a tree. If he be adorned with fruit, he hath been and will ever be worthy of praise and commendation. The fruits of the human tree are exquisite, highly desired, and dearly cherished. Among them are upright character, virtuous deeds, and a goodly utterance. There's the virtuous tree. But what about the water? The water for these trees is the living water of the sacred words uttered by the beloved of the world. And thus the water that you see, the river, that you see basically nourishing, and also the nourishment. You can't see it unless you pay close attention to the roots of the tree in the painting actually getting nourishment. And they are kind of golden to have a subtle symbolism that the tree is getting food and water basically to grow and show the virtues, which are the fruits.
To show you how shallow I am, I saw the water and I thought, oh, it's symbolic of our need for streaming services now.
That's great.
Multi-layered metaphors.
All right.
Multi-layers, yes.
Another question I had, which sounds silly, but I have noticed that a disproportionate number of happiness books and such have yellow on their covers, including yours, which I thought was funny. And then I looked up something called the 5 paint colors that will make you happiest, and yellow was the first one. So I thought that was interesting, which makes me wonder if I should be painting my house or anything. Did you do any research? Was that why your cover was yellow? Was that part of the process, or was it just pure coincidence?
No, actually, coincidence. We got 5 different cover suggestions from George Arnold, and we didn't like any of them at first. But the more we thought about them, the more obvious it became that this was the right one, and especially because Dr. Stephen Post, who is an amazing person, I highly recommend his books. He's a best-selling author of several books, including Why Good Things Happen to Good People. He was kind enough to write an endorsement for the book. And in there, he talks about this book, the content of it being like a vitamin pill for the soul. And the artist at George Arnold basically played on that theme, and that's why you see a pill. So the combination of the pill and the flower in the pill and the color yellow seemed to be by far the best choice among them. As we kept looking at them, and eventually both sides agreed that, yeah, let's go with that.
Now, to take it even further, what's amazing is the first color was yellow. The second color that was considered connected with happiness, they mentioned, was sky blue.
Yeah. Renee Stein, who is their graphic artist, he's an expert. He knows what he's doing, obviously.
So it looks great. There you go. And this is the George Ronald website. Those want to order. I should say it is also, in electronic format. You can get it on the Kindle and that sort of thing, which I like the Kindle because, as I mentioned in my review of the book, the Kindle's cool because the pictures are integrated in the text as they mention it. Because when you print books, you usually have to put all the photos in one section. It makes it easier to print. But in the Kindle, you can integrate these things into the text. So it's great. So I kind of like to use the paper book in the morning to read. And then like later on, if I go back, I use the Kindle version because I can kind of see things. So it's more like a workbook. So it's kind of cool. So, and it's, you can get it, you can borrow it on Kindle Unlimited if you have Kindle Unlimited for free. So you can check it out there too. So there's lots of ways to get the book. Wonderful. Do you have any other questions? Oh,
I do. I have a question. So I was wondering, there's so many things that were wonderful to be reminded of, and it really put things in context. Was there anything that was very surprising for you guys as you were doing the research that you had not heard before, that really confirmed a new way of connecting the spiritual teachings to the science of the practice of it, of happiness?
Farnaz, Adi, Farnaz Jan, you are muted.
So, Khotan Jan, there are some ideas that you don't find in other books. I think one of them is the one that Adib just read, is Grateful Savoring, for instance. The element of gratitude plays a very important role in our book. There's a whole chapter about that. But the concept of savoring you find in other books, but grateful savoring. So even if you're savoring, a piece of candy, or just go for a walk and the breeze on your face, you're grateful for that experience. Or another one is to keep, under the faith chapter, to keep a faith journal. That is an idea that I haven't seen anywhere, and it comes from personal experience. And I've kept a faith journal for almost 10 years, and it has totally changed my life. So, when a prayer is answered, that is when I write in that faith journal. Adib and Bijan both keep faith journals too. And then, one of the most helpful uses of that faith journal is that when God gives you a new test, then you can refer to the faith journal and you see all the examples when the prayers are answered. And, you find a lot of solace in this, that God actually does hear our prayers, but he answers it in his own way and in his own time. And then, time and again, you read in the writings that patience is a major element. And so that's one thing. Or the practice that you have in our book called the 4 Gs. And the idea kind of, in a way, comes from the book called The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence, that I'm going to be talking about next week. But before you do any kind of action, you just seek guidance from God. And there's the element of gratitude and gaze. And at the end, again, there's guidance, the 4 Gs. So there are things that you don't find in other books that are unique to this book, the practices that we do in our family, or just, I don't know if I answered your question in any way.
No, you did, because that whole idea of savoring that really stood out for me. I had not heard that before. And it's an interesting, I was wondering how you were connecting it, because, in the faith, we're moving from an animal experience and expression to a divine experience and expression within that continuum. And savoring feels like it's with the senses. You're very much in your senses. And then tying it to gratitude pulls it up and shifts it into a new experience. I thought that was interesting. Indeed. So it's not to savor life, that we're not ascetics, just marching through life trying to negate experiences, but to put it in the right way. Is that correct, Farnaz? Is that what you're...
Yes, Khotan Jan. So basically, any book that you read on mindfulness tells you to be in the present moment. Like, for instance, when I teach mindfulness as an approach to meditation, I bring chocolate for, or raisins or something like that for the whole class. And so we eat one raisin at a time and we savor it. But there is no gratitude in that practice. So that was, to me, that's the thing that was missing. And a lot of times in meditation classes, you really cannot talk about God. And a lot of people don't believe in God. So, but if you think of God, then, gratitude plays a very important role in that. So to be able to even enjoy that raisin, to taste it, to me is something to be grateful for. So bringing both elements together is something that was, to me, that was missing. Mindfulness by itself is wonderful, but what about God? Does he play any role in it? So we need to be grateful for everything at all times. There is a verse from Baha'u'llah that I came across yesterday where he says, in Arabic translation, it says that we need to be grateful in each and every moment. That's very, very important. So Adib bought me a gift, a mug that talks about gratitude. There's something that says about gratitude in there. So I put it somewhere where I can see when I'm doing the dishes. It's right in front of my eyes. And every time I kind of condition my mind that when I look at that mug, I ask myself, what am I grateful for right now? So that gratitude to me is something that needs to not only be done once or twice, but we need to do it throughout the day with everything that's around us, you know, and there's so much to be grateful, you know, the sense of smell. So there's a scent meditation that they do that helps with a healthier brain. So every time I smell a candle, so I say, thank you, God, for the fact that I can smell this, because I have a friend who cannot. So things that we take for granted, or, you know, hearing music and things of that nature. And look at Bijan and Adib, to be grateful for them in my life. So the people we take, sometimes the family members, for granted, and a whole lot more. So what am I grateful for all through the day, every time, you know, that we can think of, or take a break and think about that. So gratitude becomes a way of life.
Yes.
It's just, to me, that's one of the major secrets to happiness, when gratitude becomes a way of life. And yeah.
That's beautiful. So next time, give that mug to Adib to wash, so that he can look at that mug and feel gratitude that he bought you the mug and he's doing the dishes.
Oh, Khotanjan, Adib does a lot of dishes, actually.
I know, I have to tease him.
He does.
Yeah, he actually does most of the dishes at home. We are very grateful for that. And by the way, speaking of gratitude, that's one of the best ways to become resilient. And that is so critical in times like this, like we are going through a global pandemic. So we all need to, everybody's after happiness, obviously, but the more tools and techniques you're equipped with, the better your chances of surviving major tests and difficulties. And this pandemic is obviously among those.
If I can add one small bit of input, as far as I think the question was asked, Khotanjan, you asked this question about any findings that we came across that have parallels or echoes in the writings. There was something that was mentioned in this presentation just now that I figured there had to be a parallel for it, because it sounded like such a sublime and nice idea, but I hadn't come across it until recently in the writings, maybe just a couple of weeks ago. The idea that we should be grateful not just for positive experiences, that's a very easy thing to do. It's almost natural, really, for most of us, but also the negative ones. Of course, we are all familiar with that very well-known admonition, one of many in a string of admonitions from Baha'u'llah, actually addressed to his son, Badiullah, but really it has general applicability to be thankful in times of adversity. But I think there is another passage that I came across from a tablet of Abu Baha. I don't think it's been translated. He says, "Shukr dar mawarid balaya az shiyam muqarrabin ast," which, if I had to provisionally translate it, it's something like, very roughly, to be thankful in times of adversity is one of the hallmarks or distinguishing characteristics of those who are near unto God. So I just thought that was as much vindication of that idea as anybody can possibly ask for. So it's very, very hard, probably goes against our nature, which is why we're so much better off for it if we do it. So just one small finding for my part.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you so much. I think really thank you for the entire Masumian family on this amazing work. Something I wanted to mention and see maybe also take on some of the things that Wade was referring to. You know, one of the things I look at is that perhaps, you know, happiness is really a condition. It's not, I know, you know, in today's society or in the in the wider world, they talk about pursuit of happiness. But really, for Baha'is, this is not something that we are in pursuit of. Baha'u'llah says, with the coming of Baha'u'llah, every created being was infused with a new capacity. And I think the purpose of life that you referred to is truly, it is finding each of us for ourselves to find that potential, to find that capacity, and to be able to manifest that capacity in service to humanity and achieving our purpose in life. And I think happiness and what the tools that you have given us is the methods, what you have described, gives us the tool to be in pursuit of that purpose, using this as a tool, and not really to be in pursuit of happiness, because I think it's really completely two different things. Would you mention? Would you say something? Comment on that.
So, Ryan and John, what you talked about is basically the main topic of next session altogether. So the whole emphasis is going to be on, as I mentioned, we are going to start with the purpose of life, but then the next week is all going to be about spiritual matters. So, and the true secrets of happiness. So today was more of the techniques and ways to do it. But next week is going to be more about spiritual matters, about service, about drawing closer to God, and what is really the thing that makes us happy and gives us lasting, meaningful happiness. That is what we're going to be. But you're completely right. And that is definitely what we're going to address next week.
I wanted to share something I heard yesterday. As a confirmation of what you're talking about, gratitude. The saying was, imagine if today the only things you had was what you were grateful for yesterday. And I have to admit, it was one of those little mental, oh my goodness, I've been so ungrateful.
Mm-hmm. That is such an important point that you mentioned, Eric. In the meditation classes, when we talk about gratitude, one of the practices that we do is I ask the students to bring to mind one thing for which they are very grateful. What is the most important thing in their lives? It could be their children. It could be, I don't know. It could be their sight or whatever. And then I tell them to just for a moment savor that. And then I ask them to just imagine for a second that is taken away from you. That child no longer you have. And then now bring it back. And so, that's exactly what you're talking about. That's imagine losing what means the most to you. And it makes you appreciate what you have in life, the things that we take for granted. It's a really, really powerful practice that helps us appreciate the things that we have in life.
So can I ask a technical question, Farnaz John? You mentioned, I may have missed others, at least 3 journals. So gratitude, faith, happiness. I think I try to write down my list. Do you literally have 3 different journals, or do you have different parts to the same journal? You're holding something up. No.
This is my very first gratitude journal.
Okay.
And I started this in February 2013.
Okay.
And then after that, of course, every night I do this practice religiously. So I go to the meditation room and I sit there and write. And some nights, we do it together as family. And of course, we have other practices. So there is a gratitude journal. There is a faith journal.
A separate one.
And a separate one. And there is one for happiness.
Okay.
Yeah. Somebody asked me in one of the presentations that, with so many journals, how do you live your life? And I said, I live my life because I have all of these journals.
Yes. And do you find that it's better to have it electronically or pen and paper? Is there a difference?
Pen and paper. There is a lot of research that says even with the gratitude journal, when you write it down, things happen in the brain. So it registers much better. So definitely writing it. And of course, when you write your 5 gratitudes, it shouldn't be like a homework that let me just do this and get it over with. As you're writing it, you savor it. So if I say I'm grateful for the gift of health, then you actually imagine yourself, doing the things that you can because you're healthy, and then, or you finish all 5 and then go back and savor that. And so that is very important to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for this very uplifting discussion.
Yeah.